It's the final week of the NFL regular season before we move into the playoffs, so let's aim to go out on a high here in our NFL best bets this week. Now, last week went 1-2 in these parlays. Now, the Eagles coughed up a lead and they went down in an upset fashion to Arizona, and Tampa Bay laid an egg, even though with a late 2-point conversion, had gotten us to cover that teaser in plus 8.5. They went to commercial, came back, and decided that a player was out of bounds, redid it all, and they missed. And that cost us our bet. Meanwhile, it all came down to Minnesota and Green Bay needing 10 points each in our other parlay that did win, and that just happened with a 33-10 Green Bay win. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how close the margin is between winning and losing. And it's been very close this season with the season record at 17-17. This week, I have 2 parlays, 4 games each from the Week 18 slate. Let's get started. It starts on Saturday with 2 games on Saturday and 2 games on Sunday for this first parlay. So the first one up is Steelers and Ravens. Baltimore has nothing to play for here, while Pittsburgh's playoff hopes are still hanging in the balance. Despite being on the road and the lower seed, it is Pittsburgh favorite at around minus 3.5 points. Now, Pittsburgh has already beaten Baltimore once this season, 17-10 in Pittsburgh, and they've owned this rivalry of late, winning 6 of the past 7 games. They've not gone to Baltimore and won by more than 4, though, since 2018. And these games, when these teams play each other, are all very close. In these last 7 games, despite Pittsburgh winning 6 of them, the games have been decided by 7, 3, 2, 3, 1, 5, and 4 points. It'll be Tyler Huntley at QB for Baltimore. He's just 3-5 straight up in his career, and just 1-2 versus Pittsburgh. But he's still one of the best backups in the league. In Baltimore, with John Harbaugh as coach, they take all games seriously, as we see every year in the preseason. So even though he will be sitting many starters, Baltimore should still be going hard, and you can only sit so many players. Harbaugh is also a money-making machine as a dog, 46, 30-3 ATS in his career. If we look at the other side of the field, Mike Tomlin as a favorite. It's not usually a good betting proposition at 85, 96-2 ATS in his career. And then when these two coaches meet up, the underdog has been a money-making machine at 23, 5-3 ATS. Like I said, you can only rest so many players. Baltimore will still be going hard here, looking to knock Pittsburgh out of the playoffs. They could pull the upset. They could cover that short spread at 3 to 4 points that they are lined at right now. They certainly should cover in a type of a teaser or alternate spread, I'd say plus 10.5 or plus 14.5 points. That's what we're going to do here. Next up on Saturday, in the later game, it's Texans and Colts. This is very much an early playoff game between these two teams, and it's basically win or go home. Both teams are 9-7. Indy is ahead on tiebreakers and in the playoffs, while Houston sits on the outside looking in. A win for either team gives them a 99% chance of making the playoffs. Now, when these teams played way back earlier this year in Week 2, Indianapolis won 31-20. Richardson was still the Colts QB. He got injured in that game, though, giving way to Gardner Minshew, who's the quarterback now. Jonathan Taylor was also still injured. Now, Stroud was already showing early signs of being the likely rookie of the year. He had 384 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. But Houston did lose a fumble. They missed a field goal. They allowed Stroud to get sacked 6 times, and Richardson and Zach Moss ran all over them for 3 scoring touchdowns. Overall, though, Houston did have the advantage in total yards, passing yards, first downs, fourth down conversions, total plays, and time of possession. So a little bit cleaner play there earlier in the year, and perhaps that score could have been different. Indy has alternated wins and losses in each of their past 5 games as we move forward to the current state of affairs here. Now, they won 23-20 over the Raiders last week. Now, outside of a 30-13 win over the Steelers, Indy has given up 20 or more points in each of their last 5 recent games. Now, that likely continues here against the Houston team that just won 26-3 versus the Titans in Stroud's return from a concussion last week. The Texans in their ATS mark here, they're 6-3 straight up in their past 9, and one of those losses came with Stroud sitting out versus the surging Browns. Now, the Colts apply the lowest blitz rate of any team in the league, so Stroud should have plenty of time to make short passes and try to pick apart this Colts defense. Last week, even though, despite the lopsided score, Aiden O'Connell still threw for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Colts. Now, the personnel has obviously changed from these teams over the years, but let's look at some past scoring head-to-heads between these teams. Last year, Houston won 32-31, and the teams tied 20-all. Now, twice in the past 5 meetings between these teams, both teams to score 10 has failed to hit if you were betting that prop, but it is 17-3 in the past 20 head-to-heads. I think there's many ways to bet this. You could probably go both teams to score 10 or more points, maybe both teams to score 2 touchdowns. You could probably tease this game either way, as they're both playing pretty well, and this is an important game. I don't think anybody blows anybody out. For me, I'm going to do a Houston teaser and go plus 8.5 on the Texans. Next, moving into Sunday, Vikings and the Lions. This was going to be a stay-away game for me here with very little on the line for Detroit. But Dan Campbell says he's sending out the starters out there and he wants to win. He likely wants to erase the bad taste in his mouth from last week's 20-19 loss to Dallas after the botched referee call and the two-point conversion and the ensuing miss when he kept trying to get those 2 points and failed. Now, while it looked like a ridiculous decision by Campbell, his stubbornness may create a bet here for me this week, as him wanting to get that loss off his mind and wanting to go out and a win could mean that Detroit has some value here. The Lions haven't had a losing streak in 14 months, and another win could match their franchise record of 12 wins. Still, they would need both Philly and Dallas to lose to move up in the seedings. But hey, when Dan Campbell decides he's doing something, he seems to do it. So let's take his word, and we'll bet that Goff and others will be playing at least for most of this game. They just beat the Vikings 30-24 on Christmas Eve, but Minnesota did have every chance to win that game, and if not for 4 Mullins interceptions and some injuries, they probably could have won that game. Jaron Hall sunk the Vikes last week, so Mullins gets to finish things here, and is usually good for some scoring and some turnovers. His other start was a 27-24 loss in Cincy. Now, if you take out a 3-0 win over the Raiders, bets on both teams to score 10 or more points. It's 15-1 in Minnesota games. Now, neither the Lions or their opponents have failed to score at least 13 points in any of their past 9 games. That means both teams have scored at least 13 points in all of those games for the Lions. Now, win or lose, I think Detroit scores the 5th most average points per game at home at 30.6. And even if Campbell does eventually start to pull some starters, I think it won't be until after they get at least 2 touchdowns. So I do think you could go probably both to score 10, maybe both to score 2 touchdowns. I'm going to go Lions over 1.5 touchdowns in this game. And we will round it out with another game with something on the line here. It's Buccaneers and Panthers. Now, last week, the Bucs laid a clunker and they lost 23-13 at home to the Saints. And they were down 23-7, so it was even worse until late in that fourth quarter. But prior to that, they had won 4 straight games. Now, from a betting perspective, the Bucs have been one of the best ATS picks all season long at 10-6. Carolina has been poor, both straight up and ATS. They're 2-4 straight up. They're 4-10-2 ATS. Both of those marks are the worst in the league. Now, Tampa won earlier this year, 21-18, and they're 6-1 and 8-2 straight up versus the Panthers in recent meetings. Now, there is a concern that Baker Mayfield suffered a rib injury last week, and he was missing some practice time this week. He will likely still be sore going into this game, but he did practice on Friday. So not only does a win wrap up the division and the playoffs for the Bucs, it also could be a big payday for Baker Mayfield. He gets $1 million in bonuses for winning this division, as well as $300,000 for a variety of different passing milestones, such as being in the top 10 in the NFL or the top 5 in the NFC in stats like passer rating, passing touchdowns, passing yards, completion percentage, and yards per pass attempt. So surely Baker will not only want to be playing in this game to get the win and get in the playoffs, but also to lock up some more financial incentives. I want to bet Tampa Bay money line here, but there is that chance that Baker Mayfield possibly can't go if the rib injury is not ready, or maybe he starts and gets knocked out if he gets hit again. And if it's Kyle Trask or John Wolford, I want to be extra safe. So we're going Tampa Bay, alternate spread, plus 4.5. So it's Ravens, plus 14.5, Texans, plus 8.5, Lions over 1.5 touchdowns, and Bucks, plus 4.5. Going through the alternate spread markets there that I've created at Bet365. That comes in at minus 112 odds. Now I have one more parlay with 4 more games, and these are all going to be the late games on Sunday in the afternoon. Let's start it off with another divisional rivalry with the Bears and the Packers. Green Bay has won 38-20 earlier this season, and they've won each of the past 9 and also 26 of the past 30 games between these teams. But the Packers' only 2 wins in the past month have come just barely over the Panthers, 33-30, and then 33-10 over the Vikings last week with rookie Jaron Hall starting the game and getting yanked because it was a terrible first half, putting Minnesota in that big hole. The Bears are ending the season on a high, having won 2 in a row and 4 of 5. Chicago's 8-6-2 ATS overall, and they're 6-5-1 as an underdog on the season. While Green Bay has not been cashing very many tickets, they're 1-3 ATS in their past 4 games. Green Bay's 8 wins, if you look at what those scores have been by, they did win by 18 versus Chicago, but that was way back earlier in the season. And then 1-17, 3-7, 8-3, and then 23 points last week. So if you look at outside of that lopsided Week 1 win over Chicago, plus 2 big wins over teams with backup quarterbacks, Minnesota, like we just talked about, as well as the Rams. When they played the Rams, it was Brett Rippon at QB. All of their other games or wins have been close. This Chicago team is surging. The defense keeps improving. They've only allowed 17, 16, 20, 13, and 10 points across their past 5 games. And in their past 7 games, they have created 18 turnovers as well. That's moved them all the way up to 3rd overall in defensive turnovers with 27. Chicago's first interceptions with 22. That's better than the likes of San Fran, Baltimore, and Cleveland, who were all 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Now, even if Green Bay's dominance does continue here in the win column, Bears should at least make a game of it. Certainly keep it close. Maybe pull the upset. Let's go Bears plus 11.5. Cowboys and Commanders. This is the biggest spread of the week, with the Cowboys about 13-point favorites here. Now, with Arizona's shocking upset over Philly last week, Dallas now controls their fate in the hunt for the NFC East title. The Cowboys and the Eagles are tied at 11-5, but Dallas has the tiebreaker with a better conference record. Dallas is not the same team on the road. It's something we've talked about all year long. Much different on the road than they are at home, where on the road they're just 3-5 versus 8-0 at home. But it's not like Washington has any real home field advantage here, where they're just 1-6 themselves. Washington just lost at home by 17 points last week, and they have given up 30, 28, 45, 45, 31, and 29 points in their games prior to that. That includes 2 30-point defeats, including a 45-10 loss to this same Dallas team a few weeks back. This Commanders' defense is also just pitiful in every major defensive statistical category. You could look at almost anywhere, and they're near the bottom. They rank 32nd in points per game allowed, 32nd in yards per game allowed, 31st in passing yards per game allowed. They've allowed they're 25th in rushing yards per game allowed. But keep digging deeper, it keeps getting worse. They're 32nd in turnover differential, minus 12. They're tied in 29th in receptions allowed to running backs, 27th in receiving yards allowed to running backs. They've allowed the 4th most receiving touchdowns to running backs. They're 32nd in receiving yards and 31st in touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. And they have allowed multiple quarterback touchdown passes in 11 of their past 13 games. So even if Dallas gets up, and they should get up, and starts pulling away, there's probably a lot of prop opportunities, the likes of Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and others in this game. Going on the road, like we said, has not been a great spot, though, to bet on the Cowboys this season, where they are just 3-5 straight up NATS. Dallas has lost their last 2 road games, 31-10 in Buffalo and 22-20 in Miami, before getting a narrow home win last week against Detroit, which was just 20-19. So still, this has to be a Dallas win. I don't want to bet double digits with them on the road. You could tease them a more manageable 6.5, 3.5, 2.5, or if you want to be very safe, just throw them in there as a money line. If you're betting on Bet365 and they get up by 17 points, that would just be an automatic win, and you can chalk that one up already as a check mark in the parlay. Next in this parlay, Seahawks and Cardinals. Seattle need the win and help to get in the playoffs. Seattle won 20-10 at home earlier this season when these teams played, and they've now won 4 straight between them, as well as 8 of 11 games. But this last game came with Arizona playing without the likes of Kyler Murray and James Conner. Arizona's also awful in division. They've been a terrible 1-13 ATS in their last 14 NFC West games. If we look at head-to-head between these teams, both teams to score 10 or more points, has hit in 13 of the past 14. If you look at this season and you look at that prop, both teams to score 10. For Seattle games, it's 14-2. They held the Giants to 3 points once, and they were routed themselves, 37-3 by Baltimore once. For Arizona, the prop is also 14-2. They were held under 10 points twice this season. But Arizona has scored at least 14 points in each of their past 7 games, and they have scored 35, 16, 29, and 24 in their past 4. Now, Seattle is no doubt the better team here, and the team with something to play for. Just because you have something to play for, that doesn't mean you're going to win. They struggle to stop the run, and that is precisely the Cardinals' strength. Seattle's 30th in rush defense. They've given up totals of 197, 128, 95, 165, 83, and 153 yards to running backs in the past recent weeks. Both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren ran for 122 and 75 yards, respectively, with Pittsburgh against them last week. Arizona could do similar damage. They're the league's 6th best rushing offense. They upset Philly 35-31 last week and even hung around, scoring 29 points versus San Fran in Week 16, albeit going on to lose 45-29. I think the Cards can be equally feisty here at home against Seattle with Murray, with Connor. They could possibly pull the upset. They could cover. You could also just simply go both teams to score 10 points, or maybe both teams to score 2 touchdowns if you wanted better odds than just both teams to score 10. That's what I will do. And we'll round out this parlay with another underdog. It's Eagles and Giants. Tyrod Taylor got 1/2 versus the Eagles 2 weeks ago, but he did manage to throw for 133 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 INT. The Giants were down 20-3 going into halftime. They mounted a big comeback in what ended in a 33-25 loss. New York has lost 3 straight after last week's 26-25 defeat to the Rams, but they are still 3-3 straight up in their past 6. This, for me, it could be mostly a bet against the Eagles. They just can't seem to do anything right lately. They're 11-5, but 4 of those 5 losses have come in their past 5 games. That's thus making the Giants their only win since November 26th. Last week, Philly lost, like we've talked about, 35-31 to the Cardinals. But if you look past that scoreline, things could have been much, much worse. Arizona held the edge in total yards, 449 to 275. Passing yards, 228 to 184. Rushing yards, 221 to 91. Yards per play, 6.2 to 5.9. First downs, 32 to 17. Total plays, 72 to 47. And they dominated the time of possession with almost 40 minutes to just over 20 minutes. The Giants don't have the same type of rushing offense that the Cardinals do, but it's still their strength. They're 16th in rushing offense and 32nd in passing offense. This could be a good day for Saquon Barkley as the Eagles have given up 189, 80, 102, 105, 116, 92, and 116 yards to opposing running backs in recent weeks. It's not like the Eagles' pass defense has been any better, ranking 28th on the year. It's hard to trust the Eagles to win by any number these days, much less the 5.5 points they're favored by here. This makes the Giants at home, where they are 4-2-1 ATS as a home dog this season, to me, a good upset pick, a good ATS pick, and definitely a good bet in teasers. It's also very possible if Philly sees Dallas up by a lot here against Washington, they just start pulling starters knowing that they have no chance to win that division. For me, Washington could be a plus 7.5, a plus 10.5, or even a plus 14.5, which is what I settled on here. Chicago plus 11.5, Dallas to win, Seattle, Arizona both to score 10, Giants plus 14.5 coming in at minus 125. That's how I bet this parlay, but for better odds, I think there's a lot of room to move around in this parlay if you want to get it into plus money by going just plus 10.5 or 7.5, or Dallas to win by 3, 4, 7 points instead of just to win, Seattle, Arizona both to score 2 touchdowns. You can certainly tweak what I did to get better odds. That's just how I went about it. So that's it. That's all. Those are the 8 games that I want to target for my Week 8 NFL parlay picks. If you enjoyed this info and stats, give the video a like, and good luck with all of your NFL Week 18 picks.